program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is silent.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. And first item here for our friends in the media. Thank you for joining us for this morning's RDA meeting. This meeting is being broadcast by Valley Media Works on Charter Channel 994 and on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM and online at valleymediaworks.org. So we'll start the meeting with that. It's called to order, and minutes from the last meeting were in your packets. You've all had an opportunity to take a peek at them. Can I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Financial statements, please.
Well, I don't see our financial staff, so I'll go through them
All right.
with you. They're in your packet. This is as of August 31st, 2018. Your operating expenses were $4,645.30, which were mainly utility, auditing, and recording expenditures. Your operating expenditures are unchanged from July. Utility expenditures for August will be accrued back at a later date. Your capital expenditures in August totaled $2,417.54 due to rental costs of the properties located at 1702 and 1706 Oxford Avenue. In addition, a funding commitment of $19,805 was made to right-of-way professionals. The commitment is to fund an acquisition and relocation costs at 1704 Oxford Avenue.
Okay. Any questions on the financials as given? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the financial reports as made, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Financials approved. Discussion and feedback on potential road realignment in the Cannery District. Michael?
Yeah, if you remember last month, we discussed one of the main things that needed to be accomplished in the Cannery District was the setting of the roadways so that we could then determine what lots we could be selling, and we're starting to get a lot of interest in that. So Mr. Solberg is here today to run you through some options and to get feedback and have some discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. We've been talking internally, and we have four basic options that you have in a packet that was passed out before you. With some of the studies that the RDA has taken for the last couple of years, at least, looking at that area. You have Oxford Avenue is coming north here. This is where the brewing project is going in. Platt Street and then Oxford Avenue extended. Right now there really is very little that resembles a road in there. We did construct the trail last year. It opened along the river, and we created an outlot that will contain the trail, and it's offset 5 feet. The right-of-way line is offset 5 feet inside of the trail for maintenance activities. And now we're looking at this corner here. How does this Oxford extended go through this large vacant undeveloped area? So I'll go over the four options that we looked at. I'm interested in hearing feedback if there's a fifth, sixth, seventh, different options that you would see, as well as feedback on our four main options that we've looked at. And I'll kind of go through each one as I go through it, and some of the advantages and disadvantages that we see. The first one is to come up Oxford Avenue, you hit Platt Street. This is a vacant lot. It has it has construction staging equipment for the brewing project right now, but it is a developable lot. To have an entryway, most likely if this configuration were chosen, there'd be a roundabout. You'd have some kind of a gateway, something to calm traffic and make it a little bit easier for pedestrians to cross in this corner. The road would then flare as reasonably as possible over towards the trail, and this gray is the right-of-way corridor. The road isn't that wide. This is what the right-of-way would be reserved, with either 80 feet that is similar to what you have on Riverfront Terrace, or 66 feet is more of a standard right-of-way corridor like we have on Barstow Street. It comes through, it creates a very large open palette, and for comparison, this is the block along the Chippewa River would be to the north. Madison Street would be along to the right side of your screen. These are the 2 blocks along Madison Street where the post office currently is here. The Smiling Moose was located here. This is the parking lot, and then the male pharmacy was on this corner. Kind of shows in proportion how much developable land, and you still have the orange around it. That wouldn't be part of the right-of-way. The sidewalks and street and parkings, on-street parking would be contained in the gray area for here. So some advantages for this, and then here's the block for the liner site, and even the liner site, depending upon how this were developed or if there was an internal Hogar Street, you even have room for a liner site size building tucked in adjacent to that. So it's quite a large piece of property that could be redeveloped. Some advantages that I see going through the different features that you have with a street is it opens up this stretch of the river to the public. You're driving into town. The trail off your screen to the south is hid by the development along Oxford Avenue. You come to the middle portion, and you would be able to drive along. You'd have your businesses on the left. They would have a view to the water across Oxford Avenue. And the public, we could have, we would have on-street parking here that would allow parking for the businesses. 80 feet of right-of-way would be wide enough for angled parking, like you have in some areas of Phoenix Park and in the North Barstow District. But then the trail would be adjacent for SEPTED, crime prevention concerns, and opening up to the community. And then as you go north, then the trail, as you see here, progresses, and that mixes in with the park area. It looks like there could be potentially, a developable spot here, but on different studies that have gone through, that's a parking lot or park space or whatnot, but that would be to be determined. We weren't looking at extending Oxford Avenue north and bringing it up here to this next block because of the previous studies with park space, and it starts to get quite steep as you go through here versus coming up Maple Street. So this would, development-wise, you have a large palette, which may be a plus or a negative, depending upon what comes in. Internally is another option that we have where you don't have a road in between. The infrastructure in the parcels is typically a responsibility of the developer, but then they're able to develop it and put it in to meet their needs. So you have flexibility that's offered with this, but it would potentially add to the cost if they have to develop their own internal system and their water system if a street wasn't replatted at some point in the future in conjunction with development here. We're not proposing that right now, but that is an option that you could have a smaller street that would go between those two. Any questions on this? And we can come back to these afterwards.
How many acres is the developable?
Just a second, I can get that for you. It's 750 feet long by 360 feet wide. Block 7, for comparison, is about 265 by 270. So it's quite a bit larger than Block 7. So if we go 400, you have almost 7 acres there, 6.8 acres right here. So this is basically just a graded, blank slate. If these buildings are gone, you could have a finished road potentially if the road goes in ahead of time. And it would be something that, with the grades on First Avenue, you could have, one level of development coming out of First, and then they would tear down, and you could have a lower level that would come from Oxford through there. There is if a developer were to come in earlier, there is a large amount of fill south of town along Highway 93. Potentially, you could use that to raise some of this up. We haven't looked at any of the actual site development for this. We're just trying to get the right of way established so we could have property lines to give developers as they come in with the RDA. The second is a subtle shift over. So you'd come up on Platt Street. This one ends up providing an opportunity for double loading along Oxford Avenue. This long outlot here is basically as wide as Block 7 is. Here is Block 7. So it's pretty close to fitting within there on that corridor. So you could have 2.5 or so Block 7s that would fit. And then for comparison, that's how the liner site fits between Oxford and the river, and you could have 3 liner sites. The potential loss of view ability from law enforcement would occur with this if this was fully developed, and this was fully developed. The trail, and I know some of the earlier concepts had, the buildings would have a front face onto the trail, so it wouldn't be like you'd have the trail going behind Water Street, but in effect, in a way, this is Water Street, this is a trail, and you have the businesses between. Assuming you'd have front doors on both sides of the development here, so it would be a welcoming face along the trail. This gives you probably, infrastructure-wise, both sides are served off of Oxford Avenue for utilities. You still have the flexibility to offer some internal parking or multiple buildings on the west side. Again, kind of an entrance when this intersection becomes skewed, and we're anticipating right now. Traffic is primarily coming up Bellinger Street. About Oxford, 2/3 of the traffic through the area come up Oxford, a third come up Bellinger Street, and they go down Platt and they go up 3rd. In the future, with development, I think there is going to be more of that traffic is going to be shifted, and it'll probably be balanced between Oxford and Bellinger. We'll be pretty close to a 50-50 split. And then 1st Street and 3rd will share more of the load that 3rd Street is carrying currently. And Oxford Extended, I think, will probably have a pull-in similar to a Barstow Street or a Riverfront Terrace. A little bit slower speed, not people coming through, going up First Avenue. It first goes up to the North Crossing, and as it grows down here, that's a straight corridor to go north and south. Again, your total acres of development here, I can run those quick, 250 and 160, so 410. It's going to be very close to the same amount of developable acreage. So about 7 acres again, just a little bit more developable land. Then you would have an entrance to the trails system at this former right-of-way where Platt was extended, and then also at Maple Street coming here. So this one offers you probably the most desirable development along the river, but as far as preserving a river corridor for people coming up, dropping trail users off and so forth, this would put that activity up here in the park. Or if a drop-off location similar to the North Barstow ramp were designed here, this could be an area where people could pull out, drop off here. But this is a lot busier intersection than the Galloway Hobart intersection. And then the
Any
third,
questions on that first?
any on number 2?
Catherine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed that there's not kind of I don't know what the right nomenclature is, but kind of a line of sight from Vine.
Yep, the view shed coming through here. Yep.
Yeah, the view shed, yeah. So I can imagine that having that takes away some of the property that could be developed, but has that been discussed internally especially since it's such a main street?
Yeah, we have looked at, and we're undergoing a traffic study to see how all of the roads from Madison Street up to Truax, the river over to 3rd interact, and Vine Street coming down, hitting 3rd Street, hitting 1st Street with this intersection. This could be potentially like a pedestrian access through here to act in here, and development could be limited so that isn't blocked. It could be a street. It could, it could be platted in the future. We weren't proposing that. A lot of the earlier planning studies that were undertaken with the development of this area did not include that as a connection. And in fact, in this earlier one, that's what you see in this location here, where there's an emphasis placed on, this is the old right-of-way, but the right-of-way isn't in place right now, so that right-of-way was vacated. So Vine Street right-of-way actually ends right here. But they did note that previously, and that's this crossing, this pedestrian crossing. So it could be pedestrian access, could be vehicular. That's something that we're not proposing right now. We are looking at this intersection to see, if this develops, at a minimum, we would want to make sure that coming down from the west side, this is your front door to this development, probably similar to Galloway Street and North Barstow when you're coming in from that side of town to Phoenix Park. And then if it did punch through, or if you come here and you access around, and then this could be like the promenade going from where the parking ramp is along Janf and the apartment building down a Riverfront Terrace, that could be a potential inclusion there. But yeah, they did call for, and we did clear out at the ends of the streets view sheds when we built the trail so you could see it, planning on raising the canopy as you go through here. And then there is a lower trail system that I think probably would have a strong push to become reality in the future down below along the river for disc golf and unimproved, not a concrete walk, but an aggregate walk. So this one, and then the entryways, how they look here and how they look here, we would try to preserve right away so we can have that potential in the future, but how it exactly looks, we won't know until we actually design the streets in here. So. But I did help, or I was invited to participate with the health assessment group that the City County Health Department put on for this area. And pedestrian access was a concern for the residents in this area and how they get in here, not only for the cannery as it redevelops, but for the schools that are located in here. So, but that's why it isn't shown, but that possibility is there as it develops. And as the CSM is formed, that could be a public access easement that goes through there. It could be decided if you all of a sudden get a signature development that wants the whole thing, and that could be worked on with them, similar to what we're working with the university, very preliminary in Sonotag, and how does that big area work with getting us between Menominee and the river. So, any other questions on 2 here? Then we have kind of a hybrid. So you come in, you would have one spot that would be developable. Again, you'd have a roundabout or some kind of signature entrance that would be calming as you come in and go through. Could be, a standard intersection too, although not quite as conducive as perhaps a roundabout, but that could be determined. You have a larger block here with, primarily a block 7 size parcel here with a larger block that's 50% larger in each direction up here than block 7, and the ability to have, one centered liner site building with some green space around it, or you could fit a liner site building in something a little bit smaller. For comparison, here's RCU, how an RCU building would fit in there. So you would come up, you would still have additional development if this were shifted to the north. Part of this could be added with this parcel, and you could have another developable lot here at the end. Again, we would need to make sure that we have pedestrian access in this area going through here. Right now it lines up nicely with this lot here, although not the largest lot for redevelopment. We're still able to come off the end of Platt Street and directly access the trail here. any development that went in here, we would be strongly proposing that we keep, a higher quality pedestrian connection than just a simple sidewalk that would go through here. But this does offer a little of both, where you would have adjacent to the park area, you'd come through, you'd have a little bit of a meandering road instead of a straight road, so it softens the feel and calms traffic going through here, parking on both sides again. Another spot for development on the river, albeit separated from the river with the public outlet that contains a trail, but you would have the views for the river for office, restaurant, whatnot, and we would still have this area half the distance of option one, where you could potentially have angle parking. People could park here, access the trails or the businesses, the walking side of the businesses, and this would be more of a public stretch of the road that invites them to the resource, and then it curves up to Maple Street either with a curve or another one of the drop-offs similar to what we have by the North Barstow parking ramp. Through here. Any questions on this one before I go? And then the last one is pretty much to keep it where it is. The existing right-of-way for Oxford is narrow, so we would widen it away from the river. And you would come up and you'd have, we would look at it, which leg stops here, but you could have a T intersection. You would extend forward, have a drop-off location. You still have the developable lots along the river. But they're not quite as developable. You're starting to get pretty tight with, there's RCU on the widest portion. This would still allow development, but I think your development would be limited the further north you go. Your parking lots provided would largely, unless there was structured parking at some point in the future over here, would largely be between the buildings, so you wouldn't have I wouldn't anticipate you would have the massive building potential along the river side by side that you would have under the second option, because they would be forced to put parking between the buildings. So you would still have some view of the river from the street, albeit over or through a parking lot, and then you're preserving this corridor, this pad over here that is about 25% wider, 20% wider than what you have with the Block 7, again in that 7-acre ballpark over there. Those are kind of the four that we were looking at, and I'm very open to suggestions if you had different thoughts. Kind of my time frame was to gather input today, and then we would meet as staff internally, try to narrow it down by the next month's meeting. If a decision were agreed to, because a CSM will be required. City has this right of way. The RDA owns a lot of the other land, so we'll have to work together, and obviously we do anyway. But I would like to be able to have you with the right of way established in this area by the end of the year at the latest, so you can be more responsive to developers as they come in.
Yeah. Reaction? Please. All right, I'm going to work backward from a value proposition over the years, and then that gets you to a couple plans pretty quickly. So if you disagree with the proposition, then you're going to go a different way. Let's start where you're showing that RCU footprint up on that building.
Okay.
And in fact, with Mike's retirement soon, we're going to have all sorts of nostalgia, but I've got the RCU plan in the packet that's in front of us here.
Okay.
One of the bruising battles that we had, in fact, we talked, I bet, for weeks with RCU about where that building would be sited.
Yep.
Their preference, their strong preference, was to site it on the water side, on the river side. And all the planning data indicated it would be much better for the community to back it over to the other side. We were trying to establish the principle that the area between the right-of-way and the waterfront should be public and preserved from the public. And the economics initially look worse because you're not double loading the street, and all the developers want to be on the other side to essentially take that river view. And and frankly, when RCU agreed, and it was not an easy sell, they said, all right, we're going to trust on this. Now, walk down this weekend, when all this fine work you're doing on Haymarket Plaza is done with that bridge, and you look at that view, that was absolutely the right decision. It didn't seem it. It won't pencil as well initially, but it was. So I take that same learning point, and I would urge you to adopt it here as well. So I'm going to focus my comments on Design 2 and Design 4.
Okay.
I do not believe anything on the trail/riverside of Oxford should be developed. It should be a public space.
Okay.
Now, how wide you want to do that is really up to you. I kind of like the way you deal with the traffic calming feature on 2 better than 4. I mean, that's your business.
Yep.
Whatever you do, I would certainly urge you to try and leave that public. Now, there are some economics. You have to have a viable space. I think you want standard block space in the developable parcels.
Yep.
But give yourself some space there. This is a high-density area, and the more space you give here for the public, it's going to be more breathable for folks. It's a residential neighborhood, and it's better. On Vine, I would encourage you to at least put the right-of-way through, whether it could be public only or not. And then at the end of the Vine Street right-of-way, where it intersects with Oxford, right there you have an opportunity to do something nice. A view out to the river, some sort of public performance area, another labyrinth, something really nice. That's your signature view coming right down that corridor.
Yep.
And you'll connect it to the neighborhood. Now again, sorry, I'm getting old and I get stronger opinions on this than maybe you all want. But to me, that is just so clearly the right way to go here. I would urge you to do it. And with that, I'll be quiet, and other views can come forward. So,
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Mike. I guess I'm getting older too. I would say, well, I wouldn't say, my research corroborates that. So I've spent years at this point trying to understand how to best develop areas like this from a value perspective. So from long run property values, where you get the highest sale prices. And that idea, that you have sort of river space or water space, then public space, then private space. That's what shows the highest value proposition, rather than river space, public space, private space, public space. So looking at these numbers, right, so numbers 2 and 4, if you have either of these options that are up here now, which I believe are 2 and 4, then the area to the right on this map of Oxford Avenue, if that's developed into sort of private development, I would suggest that that's actually likely to produce less value down the road than the other options. Now, it's not to say that those other options are more desirable, but they will be if those areas are developed. If those areas remain undeveloped, or at least very, very minimally developed. What do I mean by minimally developed? I mean like a donut stand or something like that. I mean, people seem to like food trucks these days, so maybe it's like a food truck zone or something like this. I think that's going to come and that's going to go. But if those areas are attempted to develop into significant commercial properties, you're going to end up with a Water Street style situation, where the bike path and whatever actually detracts from the value of those commercial properties rather than adding to the value of those commercial properties. Anecdotally, what I found is that if you just put a bike path in there, those properties are going to consider that their space, and they're going to resent there being public space between them and the river. Does that make sense? Whereas if there's a road there, or if there's undeveloped space, then it's generally acknowledged public space, and it ends up adding value to the properties, in this case to the left of those roads. And that's certainly been the case with the Phoenix Park area. And I would suggest it's actually been the case pretty much in any city. You think of Lakeshore Drive, Chicago, you think of the Corniche in Abu Dhabi, all and countless other cities, right? You run that road, yep. Water, public space, road, commercial space, walking back from the river. This is the way to do it, in my opinion.
Are there restrictions on what can be developed there? In that area? No?
They could
it'll be rezoned for probably mainly central business district, but anything that would fit into that zoning. The height restrictions we're in such a low valley there, it doesn't hit the height of the airport corridor.
You can, as a redevelopment authority, can impose restrictions going forward, but other than, where you are along the riverfront and the DNR guidelines, no.
I didn't know if maybe it was, retail on the first and,
But it would depend on what you establish and what it's zoned for.
okay. I didn't know if we had set those parameters yet.
Okay.
Catherine or Dale, any feedback?
I like this formula Tom talked about of water, public space, road, private space. I think those 4 elements in that order are pretty instructive. I also think that there's increased sense of safety because people can see more versus one small space and then kind of a space in between the buildings. So I think the wider space and that room to breathe is, to me, is desirable. And I think it is really important to, I know it's not a decision point for today, but I'll just say today that I think it is important that that viewpoint is opened up, especially for the residents in Vine Street. So this is supposed to help benefit them and for them to have a sense of pride, especially when they're leaving home and going home lots of times throughout the day, to be able to say,
Okay.
Dale, any?
I would agree with the comments about the space and creating spaces within the density so that we don't build something where you feel like you're walking down 4 or 5-story canyons. And the idea of putting some space to the right, I think, is a good idea. My other comment is curves. That seems very straight and...
Excuse me, Dale, I think I'm getting a sign that we should talk a little louder for our TV folks.
Well, that would be like to go here then. That curves are a good thing. And so to the extent that we want to build more of that open space between the road and the river, if it could have, it'll feel more open and more inviting, I think, if it has some curvature to it.
Okay.
That works with the public space features that we might want to put in.
So can I summarize a little bit that the board looks at sort of a modified 2 or 4 setup so that it is Tom, as you said, it goes the water, the public space, the road, and then the private. So you do some modification of 2 and 4 that does that, but still maximize the potential for development from a value standpoint. Is that a good way to summarize that? Comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Anything
That's
else?
exactly what I was hoping for feedback.
Definitely strike.
Then we're successful in something. This is wonderful.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Thank you.
I will be back in a month.
All right.
Maybe 2 options. I'll have one with Vine Street going through and one without, and to examine.
All right,
Thank you.
very good. Thank you. Okay, the next is the discussion of history, purpose, and process of the Redevelopment Authority, and I'm the guy that sent the memo on that, so I'll make these comments before I turn it over to Michael. With Michael's resignation, and then realizing that Jeff and Janine were going to be leaving at the end of the year, I had the horrible realization that I would be the only one with any supposed memory of this, and some of you would actually depend on me to remember what we have done. And so with that in mind, I asked Michael to do a historical retrospective of what we have done. That I would like to be able to have available to show the new members that replaced Jeff and Janine. so that everybody sort of is up to speed as humanly possible. And also just about what this board does, why it does it, where it gets its financing, et cetera. That's sort of a review to all of us. And then I would also like to throw in a little bit of discussion of where we go from here from an executive director standpoint. I'd like to hear how that is done, because I joined the board after Mike was here. I didn't know he could leave. I didn't know what was allowed. And so I was shocked that he was going to be leaving. So we need to know that. And so, Michael, if you'd give us that retrospective, please.
Sure. We're going to put it up on the screen, too, but this is kind of a report we made about 3 years ago to the Redevelopment Authority, so we kind of dusted it off and made it current with some of the new figures and everything. This first map are your 5 different districts that you have. So the green areas are the official boundaries of the Redevelopment Authority. You had the Lakeshore development, you had the Sioux Line, the West Madison Street, and then your 2 most active ones right now are the North Barstow, where we're kind of finishing up the last parts of that, and then the Cannery District. So just, I won't read all of it, but because it'll take too much time. But Half Moon Lake, our major role there was just to create a spot for a new school. So the RDA did some clearing and everything to create that, and I think all of you know we have a beautiful school located there. And just some of the pictures of some of the older properties that we acquired and cleaned up and made available, and then created that space that they could build the new school. North Barstow, as I mentioned before, it's still active. We're finishing up some of the remaining lots, most particular Block 7 and the Liner site. But it's a 23-acre site that included the now famous Phoenix Park, and that the community has adopted and done great things with. We acquired 18 residential properties, 17 commercial, industrial, and 4 vacant lots. Your valuation, actually we'll have soon the 2018. If we'd had another week, we could have had those figures to you. And in fact, I'll try and send them out to you to update, so you'll have an even better feel for where the valuation is now. But as of January of 2017, it was $76,740,400, and you've expended almost $34 million in that area. Some of the original maps and such, if you remember, when we do conceptual plans, many times there's changes, and you start out with a concept and it evolves into something. This one was one of those where originally the parking was all in the middle and development was all around it, and then as developers came in and gave their input, we made changes to what we currently have there now. Very strong in the mixed use that Catherine was mentioning, or Connie was mentioning, with the commercial on the bottom and housing above or office above. And then those of you that were around, it was one of the rougher neighborhoods. Jeff had mentioned before the meeting started that finding a dead body was one of the bad things that happened in that neighborhood. It was very high in crime. The buildings were not taken care of and everything. So what might have been the worst area of Eau Claire is now probably one of the nicest areas. The city created a TIF district to go along with the building of the park and the acquisitions of properties and such, and that TIF district was instrumental in us being able to do it. And then, of course, RCU coming forward to build their corporate headquarters gave us the increment that would be needed to go towards the new TIF. So some of the again, the mixed use and the housing, this was an area for the first time that we brought a lot of new market rate housing to the downtown. Before that, it was usually just some upper apartments above businesses and such. So one of the real success stories of bringing more housing to the downtown happened in this particular district. The Sioux Line development, that's kind of on the east side of Dewey Street along the Eau Claire River. There was an old Sioux Line depot there that was falling apart and dilapidated. Also, we acquired 3 residential properties and 3 commercial properties and 4 publicly owned properties. So some of the highlights there are the new chamber building, the building at 7 South Dewey that SDS Architects and Trust Point is in now. It's generated $6 million, almost $7 million, and expenditures of almost $2 million. One of the areas that we were counting on at the time was the Hipsch property, the former Hipsch property that has gone through a couple ownerships but yet to be developed. But that was, at the time, was a key component of what we thought was going to happen in this particular redevelopment area. So some of the pictures of the buildings that came down in the housing. One of our smallest redevelopment areas was on West Madison Street and Bellinger Street, the corner there. It's only 2.6 acres. It included 6 residential properties and some vacant commercial land and public land. So we did cleared the property and sold it to a partnership, Riverside LLP. Originally, a lot of the workforce, job centers and different agencies that worked for finding people jobs were in that area. Now there's a lot of medical in that particular building. It's 55,000 square feet. Current assessment is almost $5 million, and your expenditures were about $450,000. And then that leads us to the Cannery District, which is your kind of up-and-coming area there. Was created in 2008, consisted of 25 properties, and I believe it's a little over 30 acres, so it's our largest redevelopment district. To date, we've acquired all of the riverfront property, some of the property on the other side of Oxford Avenue. We are currently working on purchasing the property that are the housing right behind Quick Trip. Once that's done, that'll leave some properties that Jack Kaiser owns, but we have an agreement on price there, and then the tax service. So you're getting very close to acquiring all the property that you originally intended to do. The brewing project, if you've been by there, is well underway and is going to exceed valuation and expenditures by the owner. So it's going to look very, very nice. This is the map that does show you the pink area is the remaining properties to acquire, and the yellow are the ones that are already done, and then the green is the park area and the bike trail. So again, some older industrial service type businesses that were along there, some very I guess not taking care of properties, a lot of environmental issues. So slowly but surely we bought those up and took buildings down. Also was right across from the where the Lazy Monk is now. That was a former lumber company that was going to, the city was going to buy it just for bringing the trail under and such. And they stepped forward and asked me to talk to the city and see if they could find a location on there. So we were able to get a nice brewery there, and they draw a lot of crowds to that particular area. So this is our kind of the valuation summary, the start dates of the individual districts, and then their base valuation, and then what their valuation was as of January of 17. So the school being private, there's no valuation there. On the Sioux Line, the base valuation was $329,100, and it's now at $6,928,000, about a 2005% increase. West Madison, base value was $386,064. It's now up to $4,650,000, 1,136% increase. North Barstow started out at $12,418,400. It's now at $76,744,000 at as of January of last year, increase of 518%. And in Cannery, which is just starting out, you had a base value of about a little over $4 million, valuation now of about $2,868,700. So it's in the negative at this time. So your return on investment has been pretty good, as you can see from the expenditures versus the valuation. So we just want to remind you of the work you do, the success that you've had, the future that could happen in some of your open redevelopment districts. So.
Okay.
Well, that's it on that part. Yes, you had many questions.
Yes, I did. Well, I like the return on investment, though. You could manage my portfolio if you'd like.
So your question number 2 in Mr. DeRosa's email was number and type of developers that we have worked with. And so the city actually uses the request for proposals that I put out, the format and everything, when I started with the Redevelopment Authority. And I guess probably Jeff and Mike might remember this, but we would be lucky to get 1 or 2 responses. There was not a lot of interest in being developers down in this area. But I now keep a spreadsheet of the developers that we send out the RFPs to. There's a list of just under 49, and where before we had to pretty much deal with local developers. On this list of 49, there's maybe 5 local, and the rest are Minneapolis, Madison, Milwaukee. We have an Iowa, we have an Illinois. So I think one of the accomplishments you guys have had is you've done such good work that now there is interest from the regional development base, not just from local. So I think you could be proud of that, and that others have caught on to what's going on here and have an interest. So a real a good mix of local developers, regional developers, and then a mixture in Minneapolis area and some of the other bigger metro areas. Let's see, next question was, what type of projects have we passed on and why? So typically there's usually two reasons that we would pass on a project. The RDA's work and the city's work are highly tied together, usually using a financial mechanism of a tax incremental financing district to help pay for the expenses and stuff. So whenever we look at projects and proposals, typically from a developer, there might be a ask. Yes, lower cost of land, TIF incentive, something what they call it, minding the development gap. How do they make money? So if in cases where we would turn it down, it might be that whatever our expenditures at the time, paying for a park, paying for acquisitions and stuff, has a value, and we need to get a return, so we need new increment, new valuation. So each project that we entertain, that's one of the main things that we want to see. What valuation are they giving us for the land that we are giving up, and how does that pay for our expenditures that we've incurred? So taking North Barstow for an example, it's a very mature TIF. We started that in 2002, and here we are in 2018. There's not as much time left to recapture, increment, and pay for those expenditures. But what we're finding, and maybe we were all a little naive back in the old days, that we just had to give an incentive to one, and then that was it. We still find that there are a lot of requests for incentives. And so, we know that there's about $12 million in expenses that we have to still account for in the North Barstow area. And those are things that were added later, like the ramp and such, so improvements that made it better for the area. But now bigger expenses than what we first anticipated. So, in the last few years, we've probably had 3 or 4 requests that have come in that we've had to turn down because their valuation they were giving us plus their new request for TIF did not get us to where we needed to be above the 12 million that we already had. So that's usually the one thing if we don't go forward with it. The other one might be if it's not a fit for use or look. And for example, we had a company from Eau Claire that wanted to be downtown, but a lot of their business was warehouse. And the look of the building they wanted to build looked like a warehouse. So not compatible to kind of the vision of downtown and such. So those are usually the two things that might cause us not to move forward if it isn't fitting the vision, or if it just financially doesn't make sense. Let's see, how projects are funded and how RDA funds are accumulated. So in the early days, most of our funding came from two sources. The Economic Development Fund that the city had set aside, which a lot of city economic development activities came out of. And then also in the early days, we received Community Development Block Grant funds. It was a slow process. We'd get 250 to 300,000 from EDF, and maybe 150,000 from CDBG. Well, as those of you that have seen the expenses of buying a property and the relocations and such, that doesn't get you very far when you're dealing with 30 acres of businesses that you're and residents that you're trying to take care of. So EDF dried up, funds were depleted. CDBG, the city's funding has gone down significantly over the years, and what's remaining tends to go to our housing authority and development. So what Dale did last year, and was a big benefit, in his budget, he asked the city council for $1.2 million in CIP funds, which, compared to 250 a year, $1 million, it went a long way. And I believe in his budget this year, he's also proposing something similar, which would hopefully then allow you to complete all your acquisitions and relocations. So that's kind of been the funding. Now, you've also, whenever possible, applied for grants. If there was brownfields involved or something like that, you've been very successful in getting grants and stuff like that, too.
Who monitors the grants?
So we have staff. Christine's very involved in that. Colleen, she and our risk manager is very involved in it. It is a process where there's a lot of reporting and everything, so it's not just you're given money and fine. There is a lot of work that goes into reporting, making sure everything goes the way it's supposed to go and such.
Okay.
Let's see, how projects find their way onto our agenda, step-by-step look. So it can happen several ways. One of the ways we do it now, the city manager has a development team that meets every 2 weeks. That's his kind of his senior staff that relates to economic development in some way. We go over our major projects, including our redevelopment projects, and if there's consensus on that, it makes it to the agenda that way. Also, the chair has the ability, as you did today with setting items on the agenda. Board members could come to you and ask for something to be placed on the agenda. So those are the main ways that things get to the agenda.
Okay.
How the RDA picks an executive director. That's simple. The city manager appoints the executive director for the redevelopment authority. So that's hasn't had to happen in the last 20 years, but so that's the process that would happen now.
Okay, very good. Any questions or comments?
My only additional recollection, Mike, you did use RFPs a lot, and you really, I think, helped refine that process. But you're right, in those beginning days, nobody was going to respond to an RFP for downtown Eau Claire. So you actually went out and you met with people, I think, constantly, just so that they would even look at a proposal to bring it forward. So there are times when, to start some of these things, you just have to, I don't know how many people you talk to, but it's a long list, I'm sure. And that involvement really made a difference, especially around 95. It just did, and I think terrific job at that.
Any other comments? And I know those early years, I thought we were going to have to run bake sales to get the money to do stuff, so.
Yep.
And Michael, while there will be a few things a little later we'll do to thank you, I think that the going back through what this group has done and it's your leadership, everything you just went through is our pat on the back to you and saying thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda, motion authorizing Scott Allen to sign lease agreements. Michael?
Well, as I leave, there has to be somebody who can sign something until that interim is, or till the position is filled. So this is to give Mr. Allen that ability to keep you moving until the position is filled.
Okay. Can I get a motion to that effect? So move second.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Mr. Allen, you now have the power of the pen. Okay, and you have the pen. I'm impressed. Brett Jerome, that's great.
Here you go.
Okay, Executive Director's report. Michael, anything else?
Yeah, just got a few things I wanted to leave you with. So as I wind up kind of my leaving and what I'll be transferring over to my replacement, I just wanted to go over where we're at on some projects. So in the Block 7, we didn't go out for RFPs, but so much interest came, we decided to set a date for proposals, and we asked you about that at the last meeting. So on September 28th, we are asking for those proposals to come forward. I'm expecting at least 2 for sures, but it could be as much as 6 or 7 that have expressed interest. So I'm hopefully turning over to you some really good potential proposals. I know some of them are excellent developers with long track records. So I'm very confident that out of that you should find something that can finalize Block 7 in the Liner building. In the Cannery District, so we have several things going on there. Still working with Wired Properties on the Pocket neighborhood, waiting for them to get back to us. We met with them later the day after your last meeting. They made some presentation to Dale's development team, and they are supposed to be getting back to us with running some numbers and everything that we can look at. So waiting on that. The Curling Club will be moving forward. That they probably will be coming to one of your next couple of meetings to see if you are interested in their concept there. As you remember, in our conceptual plans, there was a spot for a building like that. Also, we received again, to the city staff, there was a developer that came in last week with a proposal for one of the lots on the river. We'll probably be getting his financials into Jay, and hopefully that'll be something that makes sense to bring to you too. And then we also entertained a developer who also has a client that's looking for a river restaurant. So I'm real excited about that. When my replacement can tell you more, it's a substantial restaurant with a long track history, and I think you'll be very happy. They're looking at both the Cannery and Block 7, or the Liner site. So I guess what I'm telling you is you're in good shape. You're going to have a lot of good things to look at, and I wish you the best on it. I think you'll find something good amongst all of that. Your next meeting date is October 17th would be the third Wednesday. And you'll excuse me if I don't attend.
Okay. No other, well, a few announcements and correspondence, just a couple of things. Dale, if you'd keep us in the loop on the taking a look at a new executive director, keep me in the loop and or the whole group.
Actually, you're going to be invited to participate in the interview process.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I unfortunately will not be here October 17th. I'll be out of town, and I hate that because this is what a great place this is. this is going to go to my head now that you're sitting before me and below me. It's quite impressive. Catherine, you once said what to address me. You can now say Your Excellency instead of Mr. Chairman, okay? Would you do that?
I will.
I figured you would. Okay, the last thing then before I adjourn, Michael has spent so many years of his life, and as I said, I think the results speak for himself, and nothing else forever. The RCU building will be a thank you from Eau Claire to Mike Schatz. And so we have a plaque we'd like to give Michael, and it's a resolution. Whereas Mike Schatz has served the citizens of the city of Eau Claire as a member of the Redevelopment Authority since 1985, and whereas he has served as executive director since May of 1999 and led contact with the Redevelopment Authority, and whereas he has been a strong advocate of downtown redevelopment, riverfront beautification, quality construction, and economic development, and whereas his depth of professional experience and knowledge of development has been a keystone of the Redevelopment Authority, and whereas his thoughtful and detailed review of redevelopment proposals has encouraged higher quality development for the community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Redevelopment Authority of the City of Eau Claire hereby shows its appreciation, as well as the appreciation of the citizens of the city, to Mike Schatz for his contributions, leadership, and service to the City of Eau Claire. Michael? Yes. It's yours. And I even wear a sports jacket for this. Okay, thank you much.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. This has been a fabulous board to work with. It's been neat to be your leader on it, and your thoughtful way you go about and approach all these projects has been wonderful. You know, in my job in economic development, there's not a lot of, at the city level, you have people that are in all different, representing all different things. They're not just economic development. So it's nice to be reporting to a board and working with a board that's all, focused on economic development. So that's one of my pleasures, has been working with the different boards I have, and you guys are at the top of it. Jeff and Mike, you've been there almost from the start of it, so we've got a long history of success together and everything. It's not easy to walk away when everything, is great and going well and everything, so I'll miss you guys. And
we will miss you.
I appreciate everything you do. I'll be watching what you accomplish in the future, and I think you got a great opportunity to keep things rolling and everything. So I leave you in good hands.
Thank you. Okay, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. Call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689. Or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715